What do you want to talk about today, Andy?
Well, I have one topic. Do I need a content strategy, or should I just start posting? I like to phrase my conversation points in terms of a question. So the question is, just to repeat it, do I need to develop a content strategy, or should I just start posting? And we'll get into it. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, that is a topic that I'm going to like, of course, as I have opinions on that. What I want to talk about today is the question of, can a brand grow too fast, right? Or can a brand get too popular too fast? Is that a bad thing? And I want to explore that. And I have a local example that I want to take a look at, which should be very, very interesting.
All right, well, let's go.
Great. And that signals the end of the theme music right there, exactly on time. First of all, I want to preface the start of the podcast by saying what I'm going to talk about is not an ad. It is not a sponsorship. We have not been contacted. It's not something we've been paid to do. I'm only talking about this because I've been observing it on different social media platforms, and I find it to be very interesting. Today, I want to talk about a brand that is upcoming, and keeping on the theme from last week of fast food, I want to talk about a brand called Yummy Hot Chicken. Have you heard about them?
Oh, no, I haven't heard of Yummy Hot Chicken. I heard about Hot Chicken, but for some reason, not together with Yummy. Is it two different?
It's two different brands. Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't hear about the new one. What's happening with them?
I think you're thinking about THC, which is Trini Hot Chicken.
Right. Yeah, that's what I know.
Right. This is not THC. This is YHC, if you may, although no one has called it that till just now. Yummy Hot Chicken, right? So let me talk a bit about them because they have popped up and things have been going a little crazy if you've been on social media and have been checking those things out. So Yummy Hot Chicken first posted on their Facebook on the 27th of October last year. So they just put a profile picture. They first posted on Instagram on January 9th. And that post was saying they're going to be launching soon. And they first posted on TikTok on January 13th. Right. And they had a launch, their official launch was on January the 16th, right? So actually to date, because today is the 16th of March when we're recording this, so it's been exactly 2 months since the first restaurant or fast food outlet has opened. The first day that Yummy Hot Chicken opened, they sold out, completely sold out, right? And people reported waiting over an hour in the line to get this chicken that was just launched. And just for context, they only opened one branch, and that was in Marabella, so it was in South. So not along the East-West corridor, not along the popular places, but in South. As of today, and I checked it this morning before we came on, Yummy Hot Chicken has garnered 17,000 Facebook followers. It has garnered 8,800 Instagram followers, and it has gained 29.9, let's call it 30,000 TikTok followers, along with hundreds of thousands of views and all those different things.
Right. And
they became incredibly popular very fast. Unfortunately, you haven't heard of them. But that's okay. It's really a kind of a social media brand, interestingly. So why do you think they gain all that popularity so fast, Andy, before I reveal some of the things?
I wondered. Usually if something is unique, it would be worthy to be talked about, and people would kind of talk about it on social media. So I'm wondering what's so unique about it. Can be the hot part in the hot chicken, because we've had hot chicken before, like we just mentioned. So I am actually wondering, what is it that could make it so viral? The other thing could be, and this is somebody who has not experienced any of it on social media, the other thing could be content.
Right.
So either is a real unique product, or unique delivery system, or unique packaging, or you have very content that stands out a lot. Those are the only two things I could see that would drive this level of popularity. So yeah, I'm not sure what is it.
Okay, all right. Those are good. Those are good thoughts. Excellent. Right. So let me explain what happened with them, or what I think happened, and obviously that's supported by some evidence that I've pulled together. Right. So they got very popular very fast, and one of the big things that worked for them was due to their social media strategy. Right. So they began posting, and of course they grew on social media. So they had a lot of homegrown content, what I define as homegrown content, which is none of the content was shot with any fancy cameras. They use their phones to shoot all the content. Not, and I looked at all the content that they put out, because basically all of the content is mirrored across all the platforms. They are not doing specialized content for individual platforms. Whatever they post on Instagram, they post on Facebook, they post on TikTok. There's basically no difference. And so it's all the same across the board. So they have shot, even though it's done well, it's been shot with phones. As far as my assessment is, being a professional in media, I can tell.
Right.
The first thing that they did. The second thing that was very clear from the outset, like after their third video, they use borrowed authority, which means they stitched a lot of content with and had a lot of green screens with popular celebrities. Like, for example, they did a green screen of Marshall saying, look why is, I'm going in there now, I'm going in.
Good morning, and I am excited. I am excited to be walking past that. You understand? Come in, come in, come in, come in, again, come in, come in, come in, come in, again.
They did some stitches with that and some green screen, and that was part of their initial strategy of putting on that type of content. So they used borrowed authority from people who were popular. Now, it's notable that Marshall did not endorse the Yummy Hot Chicken, but in the wild, wild west of social media, you could stitch anything you want. So they did that. They stitched that. And that was one thing that really helped them. Mm-hmm. The third thing that they did, I think was very important, is that they had authentic, and I must emphasize this, they had authentic UGC, user-generated content. So there are a lot of people who did reviews. And there's something about how they responded to that, which is very unique, which I will mention later and I'm going to mention now. But they had a lot of authentic UGC. So people went to the store, they posted about the experience, they posted about how the chicken tasted, and basically Yummy Hot Chicken reposted all those different things.
How can I ask, how did they encourage people to, like, what was the mechanism they triggered to encourage people to create their reviews and their UGC and so on?
I think it's just a symptom of how social media is now, where everybody wants to review something first and do something new. I don't think they particularly encourage people or told them to repost us or tag us or anything. It didn't seem like that's what happened. It seems like they had this launch and people really wanted to find out, to talk about it. Like it's something new, it's a new kid on the block. And I don't know if it's also a symptom of it being a chicken place in South, which is not usually where these businesses pop up, even though that's been happening more and more recently. But it didn't seem like they told people to do anything. People organically did it. There are some people that they probably spoke to, like I could identify probably one person who they spoke to, who did a review on day of launch, and you will know them. That's Rendelina, who interestingly are also from South. They did a review on the day of launch, which I am thinking that they probably reached out to them for them to do that. But everybody else, every subsequent reviewer seemed to be organic, except for one which was recent, but that is not, I'm not counting that one. Right. So, and then recently, last month, which is February, they launched a jingle competition. Right. So in this launch, they said, post your jingle for Yummy Hot Chicken to social media and tag us. Right. So that's what they did, and people did in droves. It kind of reflected the Dr. Pepper jingle thing that happened earlier this year. So people were interestingly doing jingles similar to that sometimes. And it were pretty bad, but that's part of their vibe. This kind of homegrown kind of sometimes is bad, it's so bad it's good type of vibe. That's the vibe I get from from them. And lastly, to talk about their launch, when they launched, to talk about the product itself, which I haven't really dwelled on at all yet, they did in fact have free ice cream for the first 100 customers on launch, and which was something that they had. So that was it. Oh, and lastly, before you comment, they had one strategy which I think was very OP, overpowered strategy, which was the comments and replies. But I'll talk about that a little later on.
Right. So I guess everybody might be rushing now to check what some of those comments and replies could be. It makes me think of Wendy's. I think it's Wendy's UK. Yeah, it might be Wendy's UK. Their social media is very, some people say unhinged, but it's so well done. It is so well managed, and not being controversial for the sake of controversial, but being actually funny and irreverent at the same time. And I'm wondering if Yummy Hot Chicken is kind of following that pattern. Nevertheless, if you can get it right, is definitely a thing that's going to allow you to be successful in terms of reach, in terms of people talking about you, and in terms of awareness and so on. The interesting thing about this example, I was actually thinking about this this weekend, in the sense that I kind of relates to the topic that I want to talk about, like in terms of rushing to post, or even not rushing to post, but posting as soon as you can. And one of the things that's happening in communication these days is that we have AI that is very, very good, like really good, but still to a certain extent distinctly AI. And like most media that comes along that you think is going to replace the previous media, it actually doesn't replace the previous media in everything. It just becomes its own thing. So AI is its own thing in a lot of instances. And it means then that you could produce a very slick, well-polished video using AI. But does that communicate trust and authenticity? So some of the things you were talking about in terms of using their cell phones, being a little scrappy, probably making a few mistakes, that might actually work for them because we know it's real people behind it. And we know that it's authentic. And because you're seeing real people and you're seeing authenticity, the tendency is to trust it more. So the ability to build that brand increases because of the level of trust they could garner by not being as polished. Interestingly, when YouTubers started, they weren't polished at all. And there was a distinct trajectory into improving production value of your videos. And people started buying better cameras. They stopped using their phones. They stopped using Gorilla Pods. They started having camera crews. And the production value just hit MKBHD level. And that's the expectation. But now you don't have to build to that. You can just prompt it. And so the value of that has dropped and the value of trust has increased. So it's very interesting, the scrappy, and that's not in a bad way, the scrappy strategy that they have used in order to hit the market running, create a lot of awareness at the beginning. At least they've solved one problem. Now they have to have follow-up and they have to have a good product. But they've definitely solved the problem of initial awareness of the brand and of the product.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that is something that if you're aware of how things are going in social media and in content these days, you would just, before you even start to post, you would just take note of that. That will be part of your strategy. You'll figure out this is the way I need to approach it, which I guess is why you're saying is tied to what you want to talk about a little later. Kizzy is asking, what are we talking about? We are talking about kind of brand grow too fast and kind of brand get too popular too fast. I'm using the example of Yummy Hot Chicken, which if you haven't heard about, you're probably going to search up right as we're done with this, right?
Well, as you brought back up the theme, let me ask you a question. Why would you think, like, what's the thinking process by suggesting that a brand could grow too fast? Why too fast?
Well, I'm going to get to that because this is not the first time this has happened. This Yummy Hot Chicken example, we've had this happen before. And I will explain why I thought of if this fast growth will negatively affect them or if it will be good for them in the long term. So I'll bring that up a little bit later. But this is not the first time this has happened where a company has launched, specifically this fried chicken business, and it's become incredibly popular. And then something happens later on. So that's why it came up as a brand growing too fast. So it may not be applicable to every brand, but definitely in this example, there have been an example that's gone before that speaks to this, which I'll get to in a little bit. All right, so let me just talk about why they stood out, and I'll kind of run down because I know we're spending some time on this now. So let me talk about why they stood out. So you haven't seen them. You're probably looking them up right now, I could tell. You're probably doing a search for them right now, but you haven't seen them yet. But their visual identity is one that stood out. So let me ask you, what color is most popular chicken brands are in there?
Red.
Red, right? Most popular chicken brands are red, right? So we have KFC red, right? So Popeyes is like orange. Royal Castle is red. Church's is kind of yellow and orange. So they need hot, the fire kind of hot color spectrum. And then we have the one that you mentioned before, Trini Hot Chicken. So a local brand like Royal Castle, Trini Hot Chicken, they're both red. Yummy Hot Chicken is blue, right? Their boxes are blue and the branding is blue, which in my mind stands out visually immediately, right? And they have a really nice logo, which I like on the Y on the chicken, which I found to be very interesting. The other reason this stood out is that they have very Gen Z social media management, as you implied, right? So they have very Gen Z social media management. So they are on social media mocking the commenters, giving sarcastic replies. So let me read a couple of those so you'll have an understanding of, since you haven't experienced it, what it's like. So people have been saying things like, of course, you have the best marketing team need a raise, things like that. But the reason they're saying that is because somebody commented and said, I'm kind of disappointed it's not actually hot chicken like Dave's Hot Chicken in the USA. So Yummy's replied and said, well, best you fly out. So that's the type of comments. Let me read one more. And because of course they're in south, right? So that is like, it's far, right? Past the lighthouse is south.
Right.
So somebody said, who's probably from the north or from the east west corridor, somebody said, time I put $100 in gas on my car to come quite Marabella, I ain't have no money to buy a Yummy Hot Chicken. So Yummy's replied, well, then put 50. So instead of paying $100 for 50, I'd still come. Right. So those are the type of replies that they are giving on social media. And those are just a sample. Those are just two of the ones that kind of on one of the earlier videos that really helped push this whole thing. And the replies are sometimes a little unhinged as well. So that's the social media part. They also stood up because one of their products, they have slushies, which no other chicken place has. They focus on that particular drink part of it, which I think is interesting. They have these slushies and so on, which they allege is made with real fruit, right? They allege is made with real fruit, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that is in line with what you've been suggesting.
Well, that slushy thing is just before you continue, that slushy thing is really brilliant. It reminds me of a video I was looking at with Rory Sutherland, and he talked about restaurants in particular, like how you compete against restaurants. He said instead of trying to compete on the same metrics as their top performing metrics, find what they don't do very well and do that better.
Right.
The fact that others don't focus on drinks is just your standard colas or your standard water, and they say, well, they don't do this, let's go ahead and jump into that. That's a very good competitive strategy. So you're not just competing on the chicken or trying to be the best chicken, but the overall experience is improved, and you're doing something that they don't do well. You're doing that much better than them. So you're actually doing drinks better. I find that's interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know what drove them to make that decision, but that has definitely been something people have been talking about. Let's talk about the bad side of it now. So growing this fast has opened them up to a lot of criticism. Of course, this is social media, and people have been making videos about bad experiences they've had. Yummy doesn't seem to care, right? Yummy is embracing all that stuff. So they have had stuff like the lines are too long wait. So people have been waiting over an hour to get served. People particularly identify the fries as being like not very good, terrible type of fries. It's by the time they get it, it's cold. And one UGC creator told them to just stop making these sandwiches altogether because it's just meal or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And lastly, let me say why I think they are immune to all that. Why they are immune to all that criticism, right? As of now. Right. So the food overall has actually been getting good reviews. The chicken itself has been getting good reviews. Somebody actually mentioned, one person actually made a video and say, oh, yeah, only have 15 herbs and spices, boy. So, which I found was really, really funny. So the food has actually been getting good reviews. And I think, I don't know if they plan this or if they know this, but I think if I were to assess their brand archetype is probably leaning more into the Jester brand archetype with a little bit of Rebel mixed in. So the Jester brand archetype is a brand that seeks to bring enjoyment and joy. And then the Rebel is one that is a nonconformist, that challenges authority, that breaks the rules. So because of how Yummy Hot Chicken is behaving online, I am thinking they feel like the Jester brand archetype with a little bit of Rebel mixed in. Right. And of course, as I said, they're embracing the bad reviews. They're reposting both the good and the bad reviews, by the way. They're not hiding the bad reviews or trying to delete people's comments. And they actually went so far as to post a fake apology statement. So it starts off by saying, we would like to apologize that some people, can get called Tanty. Because they've been calling people Tanty in the comments and stuff like that. And it's interesting. Right, it looked like a PR statement, and when you read it, it's unhinged. The PR statement is unhinged inside. So they've been doing that as well. So I think they're immune right now because of this approach as well. And finally, I would say the only thing I'm worried about with them is that this has already happened. This chicken business being very popular, but somehow fading into obscurity over the years has already happened.
Right. And
it happened with what brand you think I'm going to talk about here now? Reference.
Boss Burger.
No, not Boss Burger. Boss Burger was before social media, and actually this brand
social media. Yeah, definitely was earlier before but it definitely exploded, and then I wouldn't say imploded, but contracted. Okay, so it's not Boss Burger. So who would it be?
It's a brand that is it would not be known by a lot of people now, a brand because it doesn't exist anymore technically. It's a brand called Japs.
Japs, that's what I was thinking. I was going to ask you if they're originally from Sandy Grande.
Right, Japs. Japs was a mega fast-growing, popular line out the restaurant brand. And interestingly, they were green, which was not the common color too. They were a different color. Japs still around. Japs is still around. Didn't Japs change to Daryl's or something like that? I haven't seen Japs.
There was a split.
There was a split.
I think there's one that's still Japs.
Right.
But
it's still.
I don't know.
Japs, right.
Somebody who knows could let us know in the comments.
Yeah, I think the one in Arima turned to Daryl's, and Japs is still around, but it's nowhere as popular as it was when it first launched. I remember waiting in lines to go into Japs, and everybody was talking about the chicken, and they were one of the first people who used to just throw the fries in the box as opposed to putting it in a little sack. And so it was a very interesting thing. So I hope that what the Yummy Hot Chicken is experiencing now does not happen to, like, the same thing that happened to Japs doesn't happen to them, right? And that they're able to maintain what this is, right? So Kizzy is saying that Japs is heading to Sandy Grande on the bypass. I mean, that's the thing. They were all over. Now they probably just contracted to Grande. Yeah. So that's as a sign that something has actually gone wrong, right? And I know there's a lot of different other things that happened, family issues and all those different things, but the end result kind of turns out to be the same, right? So what I want to propose is this for Yummy Hot Chicken. I want to propose a 1-year check-in. A 1-year check-in on Yummy Chicken. So 1 year from now, on March the 16th in 2027, I want to check in to see if they have gained momentum, lost momentum, changed completely, if they're still a Jester brand with some rebel, or what has happened with them. See if they're going to stand that for that 1 year test, and if their social media remains the same or has changed within a year. And I think that will be a good question. So on the podcast episode a year from now, right, once the podcast, if we're still doing this podcast a year from now, I want us to revisit Yummy Hot Chicken. So Kizzy, you'll remind us about that, right? Thank you so much, Kizzy. I appreciate that, right? Yeah.
Kizzy's working hard this morning.
Kizzy working hard. But it was an inside riff that caused the mashup. Yeah, I heard about that, Kizzy. Yeah, it was an inside riff, some family thing.
But also restaurants are tricky. And that success usually leads to, well, I shouldn't say usually, it sometimes leads to a degradation of the quality of the product. And those bigger brands that became more viral, like Japs and Boss Burger, those will come to mind. But I could count any number of restaurants that started off producing really, really good food at a good price, and then subsequently declining. And one in particular from a Marval Road that's coming to mind from when I used to work in Port of Spain. It's like you used to get a lot of food. The chicken was tasty. The fries were crispy. And then they started expanding, and they moved from what we would call a hole in the wall in Trinidad. They decided, okay, the next step is an actual restaurant. And the quality declined. The barbecue was no longer fresh. It was sitting in sauce on the counter, and quality just fell apart. So I'm just throwing in that because it's not always about the marketing. In the sense of the marketing communications, it can also be a factor of the marketing when it comes to the product. Yeah. Because sometimes success kind of leads to a degradation of the product. So that's something to also think about.
Yeah, that's so true. Kizzy saying, is it Hollywood Grill? No? Or you suggesting that this is another business that happened to as well?
On Marval Road, I don't remember the name. That's years now since I work in Port of Spain.
Yeah,
probably wasn't Hollywood Grill.
It might be. All right, so that's it for me. What do you want to talk about today? Let's hear what you have up.
Well, you were talking about posting, and what you've basically done is an analysis of the strategy that Yummy Hot Chicken has been using. And your experience allows you to break down that strategy so you could identify certain aspects of the strategy. So my question and what I was thinking about is, does a company actually need a strategy? Like, you see firms and companies offering strategy as a service, and you might be tempted to think, oh, we could just start posting. Should I have a strategy, or should I just start posting? So it's like going back to asking the question, should a business have a strategy? For me, you have to go back to that. So having a content marketing strategy depends on if you have a marketing strategy. And if you have a marketing strategy, that has to come out of your corporate strategy for the entire business. And then that has to come from some kind of vision that you say, this is what I want to be, this is where I want to be. Is it okay for businesses to just start posting? Is it strategic or right to just start posting? Because the other side of the thing, of course, is you need to get going. While you twiddling your thumbs writing a strategic plan, somebody else is posting. And while they're posting, they're building awareness, they're building trust, they're building relationships, and you writing a plan. So the dichotomy of these two things kind of has to be answered in the sense that, should I wait and get my strategy right, or should I just go ahead and start posting? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I would say if it's a business, that's such a hard thing because people are businesses now. You have a lot of people who, what the Americans call solopreneurs, right. Or, I find that question harder and harder to answer. Mm-hmm. But if you want to have some sustainability and do things for the long term, it always makes sense to plan. It always makes sense to put together, even if it's a basic thing, to have some type of strategy before you start, because you're gonna save time. So the old adage of, if you have to cut a tree down and you have a like an hour to do it. You spend 45 minutes sharpening the axe or something like that, So that sharpening the axe is the planning. How am I going to approach this? Who am I talking to? What, all the different components that goes into a strategy. So I think the wiser decision would be to actually plan beforehand to create a strategy.
Right.
I think a lot of people don't do that because they just don't know how, but that's another story.
So 2 things I want to pull out from what you said that I think is important. Do you intend to be around long term? I think that's a very important question. Like a lot of things when it comes to business, the decision making will be driven by short-term goals versus long-term goals. If you have short-term goals only, then run with it. If you have long-term goals, you have deeper considerations. The analogy with the axe is an important one. I remember hearing a variation of that. So you talk about sharpening your axe for 45 minutes before you even start. But this one is these 2 tree cutters, same axe, same forest, same size trees. And every day they would go out and cut trees and come back in. But one guy would leave for an hour in the middle of the day and come back. However, he would still have cut more trees than the other guy. So one day the other guy asked him, well, how do you cut more trees than I do? Where do you go in the day for an hour? He says, well, I go back home and sharpen my axe. So he's taking periodic stock of what he needs to be doing, making sure he's on point and coming back to the planning process. And I think why some people might be averse to the planning process is that they envision these corporate manuals. Like if you've ever worked in corporate, you've ever worked in a big business, they have these big, like your marketing plan is like a binder, and you have all this stipulation and you spend months developing it by the time. But in a world today, by the time you spend months developing a marketing plan, the market has moved on to some extent.
Yeah.
So I think some people are averse to that. It's like planning is this hard, sit down, and our schooling system has kind of put that in your mind. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things is you have to kind of see strategy like the soul inside of our body, and you have to be clear about what that is. So like one of the questions you will ask, I have to answer whether or not you write these things down. You have to answer these questions in your mind. You have to ask yourself, well, who are we helping and what do we want them to do? And then that drives your content strategy. Now, if you go ahead and you develop that content strategy, like you choose platforms, you set goals for each platform, you measure your metrics, your KPIs, and you determine the type of content, whether you're doing videos or you're doing written content or you're doing short form or you're doing long form. All of that constitutes your strategy, and you want to plan that out. Mm-hmm. But the main thing you have to answer is, who are we helping and what do we want them to do? And then kind of let that drive everything that you do. Now, if you're a solopreneur, that's kind of easy because you're doing it yourself. But when the business starts to grow, your vision has to link up with the person who's responsible for your social media strategy and your content marketing strategy. So then that might necessitate a little deliberate planning and a little deliberate recording of that planning, so that writing it down is just one of the ways you transmit. You want to impart to this other person. Well, an easy way to impart and allow for review and so on is to have the thing written down. And some strategies could just be a single sheet. Some strategies might be 15 slides on a slide deck, 30 slides on a slide deck. It depends on the business and the stage the business is at. But one of the main things I think you need to do is answer that question.
Right. Yeah, I think in terms of content strategy, I know that you kind of put it that way, and you made the point of if somebody wants to be around for the long term, they should plan for that. And the idea of like taking very long to make a marketing plan and then the market moving on is something that I think people are afraid of. The good thing about it is that if you're a small business, you could be very flexible. You can adopt the same scrappy approach that nothing is really set in stone. You try something for a little bit, and if it doesn't work, you could adjust as you go along. Turning a bigger ship takes a long time. And so when you're small, let's just suppose you're a micro business or you're micro enterprise or you're a small business, you can afford to make some of those decisions that will change your marketing in a very short space of time, and experiment and come up with contingencies. And while at a certain point in time, you would have had to spend a lot of money to find things out, now social media allows you to do a lot of testing without having to spend a ton of money. You do have to dedicate the time. You do have to dedicate the resources in terms of the people, but you can test until you get it right. And you're testing, especially if you are a DTC company, direct to consumer, the consumers tell you what works and what doesn't, right? And if you plan for that, then it will make sense. And whatever works, then you double down on that and do it over a long period of time. So yeah, I think it's important to strategize beforehand.
Yeah. I'm also pulling out something that you said there about being messy. And I think we touched on that in the previous part of the discussion too, with Yummy Hot Chicken. So sometimes you're not perfect, but you have a particular trajectory. So that's one of the things I would tell people. If you have a small business, maybe you're a solopreneur or you're just starting out, maybe you have somebody coming in to do social media for you. What you want to do is to have a clear trajectory. It's like even us starting this podcast on a Monday morning. And by the way, this is at the beginning of our Monday morning production meetings.
Yeah.
So we just started this, but what we are doing is we've started, but we have a particular trajectory in mind. Mm-hmm. So we don't start at the end of the journey. We start at the beginning of the journey, but with a clear sense of trajectory. And so that's what you want to do. So once people see mistakes, they're going to, like we started this morning and we had a few mistakes, but people are going to see those mistakes and it can be interpreted as, oh, these guys are authentic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Yummy Hot Chicken kind of started. They might make a few missteps, but it's clear that they have a trajectory that they're following. So being a little bit messy, being a little bit yourself can help build trust. And we know we're definitely going, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, we're definitely heading into a season in marketing communications where trust is going to be a major issue. Nobody's going to trust anything. We're not going to trust videos. We're not going to trust things we see with our own eyes. Definitely don't trust photographs. And so brands that are able to interact on a very real level, even though the content might seem a little bit messy or might have to make adjustments and pivots and so on, it will still, if you treat with it correctly, it will still help you because it will help build that trust with your target audience. It's going to help you build that relationship. And brands, in order to continue to compete in a world where everything is kind of equalizing, you have to continue to pay more attention to the relationships that you have with your customers and the relationships that your brand has with your customers.
Yeah. I think in another episode, we need to walk through like the structure for a content strategy. I had developed one some time ago. I know we had used one for clients that we have and kind of walk through and show people how it actually works. And you mentioned the knowing who you're talking to. So I would mention some other things like at the two who's of a content strategy at the very top, especially if you're a solopreneur, the who am I, which is your values, your story, your expertise. And then you have the who is my exact customer, who's going to be your targeting, who's going to be here receiving the content, buying your product, etc. Mm-hmm. So those are the two big who's at the very top. Maybe another time what we could do is go through an exact kind of framework for how content strategy will work. But I agree with you, Ayinde, that you need to plan. And interestingly for us, this podcast didn't start now. It started like almost 3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
Right. And we did like 5 episodes and we posted one, but something just, I know I am kind of finicky like that. Something just didn't feel right. Maybe it wasn't the right time, but it was always something that we wanted to do. Even the website had been made a long time ago, and how it actually started technically wasn't a plan. Technically, I call you up, I message you and say, listen, we're going live on Carnival Wednesday. Carnival Wednesday, was it? Or Carnival Tuesday?
Tuesday. Maybe
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday, right? No, Carnival Monday. Was it Monday or Tuesday?
No, it was Monday
It was
because
Monday.
on Tuesday.
Right. I message you on the weekend and say, I know, listen, we're going live on Carnival on Monday. We recorded this podcast. And he was like, okay. And we didn't even have I had structured things all the way before. And this time I just said, no, you know what? Let's just keep it simple. We already have goals that we want to accomplish. The season for the business is changing. Things are moving in a new way for us. Let's just get this done. Right. And all of the expertise that we had before, all of the experience that I had before making these things made it easy for us to now come and just make it naturally. So we had a whole bank of experience. Sometimes your gut feeling about strategy is just the experience telling you what to do.
Right.
That's what it is. People say it's my gut feeling. It's not really a gut feeling. Your gut feeling is just the experience telling you what to do. And for us, it was like that. But for somebody else who's not done it before, or you don't have experience creating content or making a podcast or doing whatever it is, you have to sit down and plan. And if you need help with that, you have to ask somebody who knows, which is what we do for a lot of our clients.
Yeah. That gut feeling point you're making there makes me think about authenticity again. So like the way you judge counterfeit is, firstly, you have to be very intimate with the real. And if you're intimate with your own brand and you know your brand, certain things will just feel off. Without, you'll say it's your gut, but it's because you're intimate with your brand and where your brand needs to be. So then certain things that you would do in terms of trying to execute strategy would either feel on point or would feel off because you have that familiarity with what the real is. A couple of points that you kind of, well, one in particular, I think that is important. And that is the need to iterate. So iterate. So the way you start off might not be the best way, but social media allows you to come back and change. And as you said, they will tell you, especially if you're doing DTC, your customers will tell you, and you will be able to get that information and iterate your content, iterate your strategy, iterate when you're going to post and how you post, and iterate the way you develop your captions and your taglines. And so what you want to do is get the minimum effective dose. That's a term I'm stealing from an author named Tim Ferriss. So Tim Ferriss wrote a book called The 4 Hour Body. And inside of that, he is trying to figure out the minimum he has to do to have the best possible body and health. So he coined it a minimum effective dose. So I think businesses need to do that. They need to find what's the minimum effective dose for their content and start there. And then begin to plan strategy on top of that, so that you're not necessarily, so you're doing it almost in tandem. You're not waiting 3 months to do a digital marketing plan to then begin to execute. You begin to execute, but your plan is a living thing. And because it's living, as things happen, you kind of inject new information, you inject new strategy, new iteration, new thoughts, things that are happening. You're injecting it into this living thing that changes and morphs and develops as the business goes along. Yeah,
that's good stuff. I agree with that. A whole lot. Yeah, it is a living thing. It's not something it's not a document. Not like in the 1980s where you made a document and you sat on it for a number of years. Now things are moving so fast. You have to be able to be flexible and to change and to iterate. So that's excellent. All right, I think we come to the end of this section of the podcast. Let's do a review. What did we learn today?
I think, like, if I pull up from the first part of what we've learned, I know you probably will have additional, but one from what we were talking about is get to it. Like, don't waste no time. Just get to it. The other one you highlighted was borrowed authority. How can I borrow authority in order to gain awareness for my new brand, my new product, my new business? The other one is the impact of UGC and authentic UGC. When it's fake, they're going to know. You talked about it as being Gen Z or Gen Alpha?
Gen Z is what I said.
Gen Z. Yeah, so Gen Z definitely knows when something is inauthentic. So authentic UGC. And the last one is, I think, is important. not just from a marketing content point of view, but from a business strategy point of view, which is excel at what your competition fails at.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. I find that's a very, very good point. Is that Rory Sutherland? Yeah.
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 That's adapted from one of his videos.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. You don't look to try and do what your competition does better, although you could do that. Look for the gaps and fill those gaps, those relevant gaps. I think that is a really, really good piece of advice. What would I add to that? I would just say that sometimes you just have to take a risk. Take a risk. And when you have a big corporate business, sometimes they can't take risks. When you're small, it gives you an advantage sometimes because they have to deal with legal and all that drama and all those different things. Sometimes when you're small, it's an advantage. You have the flexibility. You could try different things. And so as somebody who, as a growing brand, as a small brand, you can try different things. You can be a jester brand. You can reply to people in the comments in an unorthodox way. And it might work for you. Not everybody in every brand has to be like what Yummy Hot Chicken did. But you could do that stuff and you get away with it and it may be beneficial to you. But you do have to figure out what is your tone of voice, what is your brand archetype, those things, which is kind of complex and a lot of people wouldn't get into that. But you have to make a decision on how you want to be seen, heard, and known online, or how your brand wants to be known. And that way you could actually keep in alignment with your content and with everything that you communicate online as well. So that's important. And so that was it. What I will add on what I spoke about is that even if you don't think you need a strategy, you need a strategy. In fact, just posting is probably still somewhat of a strategy, but you can't track it, right? So you need to lay things out before. It might be simple, but come up with a plan beforehand so that when you begin to do your stuff online on social media, in digital marketing, your content marketing, that you know, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. This is what I'm speaking to. And just as a review, the two who's of starting your strategy is who am I, which is your stories, values, and expertise. And then the second who is who am I talking to? Who is my audience? Who am I serving? Who are my customers? So those things, very important.
Yeah, that's very good. I like the point you make about needing a strategy, even if you don't think you need a strategy. I will even take that a little step further. I sometimes say to my marketing students that even if you don't think you're marketing, you're actually marketing, because strategy is really just a series of decisions that you're making. So you make a price decision, you make a distribution decision, you make a decision, I'm going to communicate this way, irreverent and funny and jester. Those are decisions that you're making, and those are the strategy that you're building. That's what's actually happening. So whenever you think, I'm not going to do any marketing, when you're making a decision by not making a decision. And one is deliberate and one is not. So what you want to be is deliberate. So just to kind of summarize some of the learnings here, strategy is like the soul and posting is like the body. So what I would say is be very clear about who you are, and that will always drive your content strategy. In addition, I will add in be messy, build trust. We talked about that. So it's okay to be a little bit messy, a little bit to be a little bit unplanned, because that can help build trust. And trust is something that is going to be a big deal in the market going forward. And then the last point I would add to that, the last learning, is when it comes to content marketing and content strategy, do not be afraid to iterate. There's no 100% monolithic strategy that I must do it this way and I will be successful. So be willing to start small, your minimum effective dose, and then iterate.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today on It's Good to Relate, and we'll see you very, very soon.
Thank you very much. See you all.